While Ukrainian defenses are struggling to hold in the country's east, with Russian troops slowly advancing across broad sections of the front lines. Moscow is pressing its advantage in manpower against exhausted Ukrainian troops. Russian missiles and drone attacks have devastated cities and crucial infrastructure just as winter sets in. Let's take a look at the mounting pressure Ukraine is under and how long it can hold off Russian forces.
Relentlessly escalating Russian attacks. More than 100 missiles fired over the weekend targeting Ukrainian infrastructure. The country has lost, by some estimates, 80% of its heating capacity as winter weather arrives, and over 50% of its power generation capacity. On the front lines, Russia expending huge amounts of weaponry and human life to make small but steady gains, losing up to 1,500 soldiers per day with human wave attacks on Ukrainian positions, while Ukrainian troops, dug in behind fortifications, are stretched thin trying to repel the assaults. Since April, when Russia ramped up frontline efforts, Moscow's forces have taken hundreds of square kilometers of Ukrainian territory, village by village, aiming to take the strategic city of Pokrovsk, which is located at the intersection of key highways. Taking Pokrovsk would make it much easier for Russia to make more gains in the east. Meanwhile, Ukraine is struggling to defend its front lines amid falling morale. It has difficulty recruiting soldiers, which means it has to keep its own losses as low as possible. Ukraine has also faced ammunition shortages. Now, there are fears that incoming U.S. President Donald Trump could reduce military support. To keep the war going, Zelensky has been pushing the West to deliver more weapons as fast as possible. If they will cut, I think we will lose. Of course, any way we will stay, we will fight. We have our production, but it's not enough to prevail, and I think it's not enough to survive. While Ukraine is running low on soldiers and equipment, Russia has increased its production of tanks and missiles. Despite its staggering losses of manpower, British military intelligence estimates Moscow is also able to recruit about 30,000 soldiers a month, in part by offering large signing bonuses and by raising salaries. Ukraine is holding on to Russian territory it seized in August in the Kursk region, a potential bargaining chip in future ceasefire negotiations. And the recent U.S. decision to allow Ukraine to fire longer-range ATACMS missiles, seen here in file footage, into Russia may make it easier to hold that territory. But Russia has massed about 50,000 troops in the region, including about 10,000 North Korean forces, and is expected to mount a counteroffensive soon. Ukraine has a narrowing window to hold on to what it has, with another hard winter coming, and with Trump taking power on January 20th, adding even more pressure to push Russia back or make a deal.
Ukraine says Russia fired an intercontinental ballistic missile at the central city of Dnipro overnight. If confirmed, this would be the first time Moscow has used such a weapon in this war. Now, this follows unconfirmed reports in British and Ukrainian media that Ukraine launched UK-supplied Storm Shadow missiles into Russia's Kursk border region. Moscow claims it intercepted two. And this also follows recent approval from Washington for Kyiv to use longer-range US-built ATACMS missiles for strikes on Russian territory. Let's look at this with military analyst Frank Ledwich. Welcome, Frank. It's all about the missiles today. What should we make of Russia's apparent use for the first time of these intercontinental ballistic missiles against Ukraine?
Good morning, Phil. Yes, I do think this is an escalation, although we need to be clear about what they've actually done. So the missile concerned is likely to be an RS-26 missile, which has been under development. It's just within the ICBM category, but would more usually be regarded as an intermediate range ballistic missile. But nonetheless, it is a sort of high-end weapon. And it is designed, or has been designed, actually to threaten Western capitals. So although there was no nuclear warhead, obviously, on this now, it is clearly a signal, I think, to Europe particularly, that Russia has these missiles, of course, they're prepared to use them, and they can hit targets with them. And they did hit targets. It doesn't seem to be much of a warhead on the re-entry vehicles, but it's certainly something. It's a formidable escalation, I think.
Right, so we have these big things and we can use them against Ukraine or against perhaps you in the West. And what do we make of Ukraine's use of these UK-supplied Storm Shadow cruise missiles?
Well, it's not so much the missiles. Ukraine has been using these missiles for the last year or so, I think, against Russian targets in Ukraine, though, in Crimea and in the occupied territories there in the south. The significance, I think, as everyone knows, is that now they are being cleared to be used against Russia. And Russia's point is you don't just fire these missiles at targets. What you need is Western assistance, not only to arm the missiles and target them, but to find targets for them. And therefore that constitutes, as Putin would say, direct involvement of the West in attacks on what is indisputably Russian territory. The weapons themselves, as I say, have been used before. They're not going to be a game changer. They amount to half a ton of explosives on the end of a rocket, like thousands of missiles that the Russians have fired into Ukraine. The significance is where they're being targeted and who's involved in the targeting. And to that extent, that is a significant uplift in the intensity in the strategic intensity, let's say, of this conflict. And that's why we've seen this response by Russia with an even more formidable and very new weapon, actually.
And presumably this is why there has been no confirmation from either the British or Ukraine about the use of these weapons.
Yes, there's been some experts have been damping this down, saying it's not an intercontinental ballistic missile, which is technically just about true, but it's nonetheless a significant raising of the temperature, I think. Because at the very least, what it does is it's saying, look, these missiles, we've got these missiles, they were in testing, and we've decided to test it on Ukraine. And be under no illusion that our missiles work and that we're thinking in that direction. But on the other hand, it's fair to say as well, whilst this is another step up the escalatory ladder, it's nowhere near yet anything that people should actively be concerned about right now, although I think they should be concerned about the trajectory in which this war is taking.
Right. Give us then a sense, Frank, of the bigger picture. Where do things stand on the front line in this war?
Well, it's been looking very poor for Ukraine for the last year or so. They are losing ground literally every day, several square kilometres every day, sometimes more than 10, 20, 30 on occasion. And, of course, the centre of gravity isn't Kursk. That means the most important element of the war. It's always been in the south. And within that, the most important factor is the attritional war and the losses that both sides are taking. Losses, of course, that Russia can afford far more than Ukraine. We often hear about these huge losses the Russians are supposed to be taking. Maybe they are. But we never hear about the losses that Ukraine is taking. That's having an impact both domestically on political support for the war and, of course, more importantly, physically on the people involved and the will to fight there. That knocks on into desertion and high desertion rates, and then further into the difficulties of recruitment. So Ukraine is in a difficult situation. President Zelensky has admitted that and has said, without American help, we're going to lose. And I think that's certainly right.
OK, thanks for guiding us through that so clearly, Frank. Military analyst Frank Ledwidge.
Thank you very much. Nice to be with you.